Good morning, everyone. A year ago today, we were waking up on an election day that had enormous possibilities. Enormous possibilities. And all we got was this minority government, right? Well, what are you going to do? And here we are a year later, and Justin Trudeau is threatening to call another election. And minority governments rarely last past 18 months, so be aware of that. In the reading that I did, that's what kind of the consensus was. So here's National Post. Canada PM Trudeau puts fate of government online with call for a confidence vote. What confidence vote? What vote are they doing today? They're voting to create the anti-corruption committee, right? So this is a confidence vote? If they create the committee, confidence vote. Here's Zero Fox. He says, imagine you're living in a country where the ruling party is fighting desperately to prevent MPs from forming a committee to investigate government corruption. Oh, Canada. Right? Asking the Liberal government questions at a time like this, who does the opposition think it is? And this is Andrew Coyne's piece in the Globe and Mail. And, well, thankfully somebody on Reddit put this up. And hold on, link is in the description if you want to read for yourself. It says, do we really want a committee? An incredulous Pablo Rodriguez, government House leader, asked reporters on Tuesday that has the power to force the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, all ministers to drop their work, the important work they're doing, and come testify. There you have the rub of the question. At least as it occurs to the Liberals, the committee in dispute, whose creation is the subject of a Conservative motion before Parliament, would study allegations of misuse of public funds by the government, notably the $912 million in public funds that We Charity was supposed to manage, the subject of so much controversy earlier this year. Why can't an existing committee, such as the Standing Committee on Ethics or Finance, look into it? Because the Liberals have tied both committees up in knots, filibustering one and adjourning the other rather than surrender. This after the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament, forcing both committees to shut down for several weeks, although not before releasing thousands of pages of documents with the sensitive bits helpfully pre-redacted, a job that is supposed to be left to the committees themselves, as the House of Commons law clerk was moved to protest. Having blocked the existing committee's inquiries, the government is now threatening to dissolve Parliament rather than allow the new committee to pick up where the previous ones left off, declaring Wednesday's vote on the Conservative motion to be a matter of confidence. Stonewalled committees, censored documents, even a snap election, a disinterested observer presented with the government's behavior might conclude that it has something to hide. Not at all, the Liberals contend. It is merely that the government is so single-minded in its determination to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, an objective of such overriding importance as to admit no interruption or distraction other than the odd general election. Right? So I want to point out, they are willing to bring down this government in order to keep these papers redacted. And in doing so, I don't think this goes away just because, even through an election. I think if win or lose, I think that the Tories should open an investigation into what happened in and where did those 20,000 infrastructure projects go? Where's all the $5 billion in missing money? Like, there's a lot of money that's just poof gone, right? And because of that, the Liberals don't want to open up these documents, and they're willing to go to an election for it. Well, just because there's an election, does that make it go away? I mean, it gives time, and time means voter attention. Time means voters forget. You forget. I forget, right? Everybody forgets. Humans are suffering from constant amnesia. There is no cure. Our brains are we forget. We do that. And the people who are planning these things know that. So people forget. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it doesn't matter, right? Why did Parliament get prorogued again? Oh, right. They wanted to shut down the committees and refocus. And Coyne makes this statement, refocus on COVID-19. But the throne speech didn't have anything new for COVID-19. Nobody came back and said, we're going to open up the economy. It's really important. We can't replace the economy with government spending. Oh, I wanted to mention before I forget, and this is going off on spending a little bit, but I figured out the loans. Quantitative easing or quantitative easing. I was talking about this yesterday. I apologize that this is an aside, but it's got to be an aside because I figured it out. Like in my sleep, and I'm not doing a tab on it because I just remembered. So the loans, quantitative easing means that people have to want to borrow. Right? And the government can't force people to borrow, and it can't force financial institutions to look for money. But what has it done? It's closed businesses, forcing people to take loans, right? And the businesses aren't closed because the virus is so scary. The virus is scary because of the media, but the businesses are closed because of the government action, right? And the government action is what's forcing the lending. And the lending is what's keeping the economy afloat. You see? So it's all a house of cards. I hope that makes sense to you. I was talking to somebody just before bed or early this morning, I'm not sure, and it all kind of fell into place. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's the reason for the lockdown, is to make sure people need to borrow money. Because without the borrowing money, the quantitative easing leads to stagflation. So you're borrowing the money without it being used to create the growth. It may result in that anyway because of the lockdown. Regardless, that's the reason for the loans and the lockdowns, in my opinion, right? Because we need to keep printing that money in order to keep the economy afloat. That's my theory. Okay, back to this. Okay, hold on, let me find where I was. Okay, so I jumped ahead for coin as well. So it says, I'll go back one. It says, stonewalled committees, censored documents, even a snap election, a disinterested observer presented with the government's behavior might conclude that it had something to hide. Not at all, the Liberals contend. It's merely that the government is so single-minded in its determination to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, an objective of such overriding importance as to admit no interruption or distraction other than the odd general election, right? Ha ha ha. That, you'll recall, was the stated reason for the prorogation last month, to allow the government to focus on the pandemic, in the service of which it produced a speech from the throne containing virtually no pandemic or no new pandemic-related measures, but rather a raft of recycled Liberal election promises on everything from housing to pharmacare, right? Yeah, running the gamut. Did your cell phone bill decrease at all in the last year? No, mine either. But I use VoIP. So I use just data, and pretty soon I'm going to pull the SIM from this and get a flip phone to leave the house with, because I'm not downloading your app. I don't need any apps on my phone. I just need the ability to talk to people very quickly, to set things up and whatever. So that's my plan. But regardless, I'm getting sidetracked again. Back to the article. The same refrain, we have to focus on COVID, has been heard repeatedly since Parliament's recall. The Prime Minister's breezy defense of the government's refusal to let a committee look into the matter: we're entirely focused on the second wave of COVID-19. The opposition can focus on whatever it is they want. And now the election threat, and Mr. Rodriguez's amazing justification of it, to avoid the degrading spectacle of ministers having to spend precious time answering questions from members of Parliament rather than the important work of whatever it is they do. Because you see, that's the choice. The government can fight the pandemic, or it can answer questions about possible misuse of public funds. It can't do both, apparently. It is, of course, the government's prerogative to declare any vote a matter of confidence if it chooses, whether it should have the power to open debate, but so long as it does, there's some expectation that they should not abuse it. As a matter of logic, nothing about the mere formation of a committee to look into something necessarily connotates loss of confidence in the government, or any question or criticism of any kind could be declared the same. Neither is there anything illogical or unparliamentary in the opposition demanding such an inquiry without also demanding an election, is as uncomfortable as the Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole looked in that attempt. But then logic has nothing to do with any of this. The Liberals are ahead in the polls, the Conservatives are behind. Blocking any further inquiry into the wee affair might hurt them in the polls, but not as much, they have evidently calculated, as allowing it to proceed. Ergo, the Liberals are more willing to risk an election than the Conservatives. That is the only logic or principle underpinning either party's position. There will be much negotiating and brinksmanship before it comes to that. The Conservatives have already made a concession in the committee's proposed name from its original anti-corruption mandate. The Liberals, I thought that was funny. Like, that's funny, right? Like, this is all about the name. How dare you bring up anti-corruption committee? And here's how they're going to water it down. The Liberals have counter-proposed with the committee to look at all pandemic spending, not just the wee pandemic program, albeit under a Liberal chair. The NDP and Bloc Québécois will take up positions at different intervals between them. It is about power. This is about power, not about representing people or holding Trudeau accountable. This is about power. Back to this. Possibly one side or the other will have to climb down. Possibly some compromise will emerge that is satisfactory to both. Possibly the government will fall and the country will be plunged into an election campaign. The polls alone will tell. No, I don't think so. I think the polls are BS. But the Liberals have a comfortable lead, especially when you can count on the NDP, right? Unless they lose another half of their seats. Here's another interesting thing. Jacinda Ardern, who just won the election in New Zealand, she said, well, this says Jacinda Ardern locked down New Zealand, stopped all other political parties from campaigning, ignored Electoral Commission advice to move election to November to give other parties time to campaign, paid $50 million to media to ensure one-sided coverage, and promised $175 million more if she won. That's how you win an election, communist style. Does that sound familiar to anybody? No. So with the confidence vote on the horizon, Abacus jumped into action last night. I don't believe polls, but I'll show you what they say. Our team committed a national survey in 4.5 hours last night on the big confidence vote in Canadian politics today. We found Canadians are divided on whether MPs should vote for the Conservative Committee today and force an election. About half say, 55% say MPs should vote regardless of if it results in an election. And 45% say they should act to prevent an election. So, the Liberals were in the minority there. They didn't want to move to have an election. I think that it's very interesting the maneuvering on this. And what's even more interesting is, there's lots of speeches going on about this, etc. So, here's Mr. Polyev in the House.
The honourable member for Carleton.
So they've got absolutely nothing to hide, and they're willing to bring themselves down to hide it. That is effectively the position of this government. They are prepared to defeat themselves in order to stop anyone from asking them questions about the Prime Minister's gift of $500 million to a group that had given his family $500,000. We want to put all of this in one committee so the rest of Parliament can work for Canadians' lives and livelihoods across the House of Commons. What have they got to hide?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker,
Rodriguez there rehashes all of the Liberal talking points, saying that these guys are distracting everybody. But have you noticed the shift? Now the shift is about formation of the committee. The fight is about formation of the committee. The fight is not about the unredacted documents. The fight is not about... And the committees have all been tied up and filibustered. And the leaders of the parties all know that the Liberals have said, we are not giving those documents. You have to find a way around this. If there's no way around this, the Liberals have said, we're going to an election. That's it. That's it. These are the stakes. And so the confidence vote is the confidence vote. I think this is power, and the NDP is going to support this. And I'll show you why I think that in a minute. Here's Brian Lilly. Says, having looked at the polls, Justin Trudeau clearly thinks he can make up a reason to force an election and get a majority. That's a big part of the reason for his hubris and push for a vote. Oh, and he wants to hide the truth. Yes. He wants to keep hidden the redacted documents that were voted on and passed to be given in the summer before the prorogation happened, right? That's why we're seeing the delay. And what are they doing? It's the same thing. They're burning the money, right? Keeping the lockdowns, forcing the people to continue to borrow, forcing the economy to, turn, kind of, right? Yeah, that's what I think. And they've got enough time because I just don't think they care. I really don't. Here is the decision that would lead to an election rests with one person only, and that's Justin Trudeau. I think I agree with that. Here we go.
This morning, we took the step of putting in the actual motion that this isn't a question of confidence for the House. So the decision for it to become a confidence motion, the decision that this would lead to an election rests with one person only, and that's Justin Trudeau. No one else is calling for an election. And so this is squarely at the feet of the Liberals, squarely at Justin. This
is a misstep, I think. So they're trying to say, whoa, we don't want an election. This is akin to fading back when somebody's punching at you instead of grabbing them and headbutting them, right? So why not go on the attack here? Sure, we want an election. We want these documents. We want to understand why 1.3 million was paid to Justin Trudeau by we. We want to understand why this is, and go nuclear in the press. And forget about the press. Put it out there. Have conversations between you and Polyev. Have documents. Have whiteboards, whatever it is you need to explain it. Have a computer screen and a talking video. Do whatever you need to do to shame these Liberals, because the polls are what the Liberals say the polls are. So the polls don't matter, in my opinion. But the fact that the fight is now about the creation of the committee, and the fact that the Conservatives are giving the name of the committee, giving over, what's it called? Concession for the name of the committee, right? They've already given concessions. They're trying to run away, right? Oh no, we don't want an election. We're gonna wear the election because people aren't gonna like it, and it's in a pandemic and blah blah blah. Headbutt them. Say, yeah, we'd love an election. We would love you to explain to voters why the we documents are redacted, and put the we documents up. Put all of them up. Take a picture of them, each one, and put it on a page and have the we documents. Like, there are so many ways to shame this lying liberal government that it is unbelievable that these guys are running away from this, and they're losing. They're losing. Oh, can we please create a committee? Oh, let's have negotiations. Can we please have those papers? We don't want an election though. Weak. Here's MP Cooper.
The We organization benefited the Prime Minister's family, and in return, they received sole source contracts with the federal government. There were at least 5 such sole source contracts prior to the big enchilada of the $500 million contribution agreement.
So hammer them better than that. Right? Like, that's all good information, right? Like, you could have somebody who comes on and is compelling and talks to people and says, this is the reason that Justin Trudeau triggered this election. No, oh, we don't want to trigger an election. Please, we're sorry about this. We wish that he would listen to us. We wish that he would give us the information. He's not going to. He's already said that. Headbutt him instead of running away with your arms in the air because they're going to fight you for this. They've been fighting you for this for years. Like, stop acting like it's surprising, right? Hit them on it. Hold them accountable on it. Say, yeah, we'd love an election. We can't wait, in fact. And put your ads together. Get your ducks in a row. Get organized. Understand what's coming. And if the ammunition isn't going to work now, it might work in the next 6 months when there's likely going to be an election, because if they're allowed to get away with this, they're going to do it more. And people are going to get upset and blah, blah, blah. And then Aaron O'Toole might be in charge and he'll do exactly the same thing. It's the TikTok, and they're not actually solving any problems. And that's the problem with our governance. Andrew Coyne says the Liberals say they're prepared to send Canadians to the polls to stop a Conservative attempt to put the government's ethical controversies under further scrutiny. That's quite a campaign message. You can't look at what we've done. We're in the process of doing more of it. So we can't have you looking at what we did, because we're doing more. And if you knew what we did, you wouldn't let us do more. Right? Omar, he's an MP for... where is it? Mississauga Centre says the Conservative Party has to choose fish or cut bait. They either have confidence in this government or not. It's not about accountability. Government offered Parliament an ability to study the contract spending redaction. Instead, they're choosing paralyzing tactics that overreach. Accuse your opponent of doing what you yourself are doing. These guys are the one paralyzing government. These guys are the ones saying you're not getting that document, and we're willing to burn it down, and we will wait as long as it takes. And everybody at this level knows what's going on with the quantitative easing and the loans and the lockdowns. Everybody understands. The data is clear. The data is obvious. It's very, very here, right? Like, we're talking about actually actively killing about half of those next year, half of that amount next year, right? So seriously, lock down the entire economy. Yeah, everybody understands what's happening, right? And these guys are playing politics, and this is just playing politics. They're accusing the opposition, their opponent, of what they're doing. NDP leaders weighing in on this. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says it's outrageous that Justin Trudeau is threatening an election because he doesn't like a committee. He says Trudeau should explain why he wants an election if that's what he wants, but the NDP want to keep trying to help people. Asked whether his party will support the Conservative Party motion the Liberals might use to trigger an election, Singh doesn't answer, but repeats that he doesn't understand how Trudeau will explain why he would plunge the country into an election. In French, Singh says he won't give Trudeau an excuse to trigger the election, meaning I think that the NDP won't support the motion. Singh adds that there are negotiations about what the committee would look like. Adds again in English, I will not give him an excuse. If the Prime Minister wants an election, he should have the courage to go tell Canadians, I'm going to put this country through an election. So he's trying to make Trudeau go and trigger the election rather than giving a committee a poison pill of confidence. And so, I mean, that's an interesting point, right? Like, if you want an election, don't force the House to call the election. If you want an election, go and tell that to Canadians, right? That's an interesting little bit of chess. It's pantomime, right? I don't think that there's much space between Trudeau and Singh as far as policy or belief, right? I think they're both on the same page. Back to this. Asked again how he'll vote, Singh says he's not interested in an election. I'm all about fighting for you, and repeats what he said already. He won't say whether he'll support the motion or not. Asked again how the NDP will vote, Singh says we're working on our solution because they don't want an election. I will not let the Prime Minister use this discussion over a committee as an excuse to go to an election. He repeats, Singh calls the solution a farce, and that Trudeau's posturing over a committee is stupid. And that's interesting. That's strong language from Jagmeet. Why can't you give us a clear answer? Ryan Tulamidi asked. Singh says the situation makes no sense, and the real question is how the Prime Minister thinks that this is what we should talk about. Do you have confidence in the government? Singh says that he has confidence in the NDP's ability to fight for people in the minority parliament. Singh says help for Canadians with disabilities is something the Liberals still need to deliver during the pandemic. You know what they haven't done? They haven't delivered the unredacted papers that were requested in July and August, right? Back to this. Singh has said his goal is never to plunge into a pandemic election. It's to help people. Still not clear whether the NDP will support the motion. And this is a National Post article. Trudeau's willingness to opt for nuclear option to avoid awkward questions is troubling. Yeah, it is really troubling. It really is. It really is. Here's the Roy Green show, and we're getting out of this scandal now. So we'll find out today if this is a confidence vote. What happens? It's big. It's a big news day in Canada for this. But there's other news too. So we're going to do the rest of it now. The Roy Green show says, question for the Prime Minister: how do you define a white male interfering with a First Nations Attorney General doing her sworn duty, then firing her as AG and ultimately dismissing Jody Wilson-Raybould from the LPC caucus? Is that systemic racism, Justin Trudeau? Just asking. That's a pointed question from one of the straight-laced journalists. So, it's interesting to note when that kind of stuff happens. Another interesting thing is Trudeau's press secretary is charged by the ethics commissioner. Do you want to know how much he was charged? $250. $250. But if you have a COVID gathering of a gathering of more than 11, you are having a wild party, and that's up to a $10,000 fine. Or if you're in a park, $800. But if you have an ethics breach, that's $250, sir. We'd really like you to pay it, but we can't compel you because. Here is the I Stand with Trudeau trending. Apparently that's happening this morning, 6 hours ago. Canada is in big trouble, says, I know there are lots of idiots in Canada, but the fact that trending at 4 a.m. Is the following image. I can't even type it to me means Canada is in serious trouble. I know voting is a personal thing, but come on, Canada, how much does one man have to do before you see the truth? And that's the I Stand with Trudeau that he couldn't even type. And here is a good point that I saw shortly after seeing that first tweet. The I Stand with Trudeau hashtag has never been a positive hashtag as far as I know. It's always a defensive one, usually in correlation to something he did wrong. Doesn't make me want to vote for the guy. Could it be the ethics breach, or could it be the people don't like the forcing of the election confidence vote, etc.? But I don't think the confidence vote is getting the I Stand with Trudeau trending, because I can't imagine there are that many people. It's one thing to be a liberal, it's another to be completely blind to corruption, right? Like you can be a liberal-minded person and go, yeah, that guy's got to go. Like we can't vote for him because he's clearly not open or transparent. He's clearly not what he claims to be what he says he is. Aaron Werdick says, into spending. With the debt crossing $1 trillion mark, every 1 percentage point rises in the effective interest rate adds more than $10 billion per annum to the deficit. Yikes! I like the return of yikes. I've been using this on Twitter a lot, and I think it encapsulates something very well. Yikes. So yeah, I like the return of yikes. I don't like the return of how much money we're borrowing and spending and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't seem great. And I don't like the fact that we've lost a whole bunch of money for the infrastructure projects. Internal government audit finds 2/3 of randomly selected projects approved by Minister Catherine McKenna's department lacked mandatory checklists for due diligence. Reviews cited serious control failures. I'm not surprised. Especially the Minister of Health focuses on EVs. Catherine McKenna focuses on cycling and the environment. And infrastructure is just not those things. Brian Lilly says, I have no doubt that the decisions Ford Nation makes moving into Ontario, backed up by Dr. Williams, weigh heavy on him. Is that a joke? That said, they're feeling the economic pain. They aren't feeling the economic pain of their decisions, and that is a problem. Read and retweet. Yeah, I would agree with that. Usually I would read this, but I'm going along, and I'm not going to read this today. But I definitely agree that there are a lot of bureaucrats that aren't feeling the financial or direct impact of their choices. canceling Halloween, canceling Thanksgiving, keeping people locked in long-term care, or even like the suggestion that they're locked in long-term care, the suggestion that you might be breaking a rule, not even a law, just a rule. Like it's a rule that you wear a mask around town, right? It's not really a law. Nobody's going to get arrested. People are assuming now, people tell me now, anyway, when they see me, they understand that I'm exempt and they understand exemptions happen and people are being tolerant of it. So I think that that's an interesting turn in the whole thing, but people don't like being a rule breaker. So you get 90% compliance. So when they make suggestions like, we're not doing trick-or-treating this year, people are like, oh, well, maybe it's a rule. Maybe we shouldn't do it. It chills people's inclination to, go and have fun. And then they look down on people who've made a different choice than them, right? Like, oh, they're jealous of the fun, right? And worried about the damage that the news has told them that this could potentially do. Except that, I mean, there's no, I won't get into COVID yet. I'll get into COVID a bit later. But it's frustrating, right? And when these decision makers make these declarations to millions of people who have elected them to be leaders, not to say that they don't understand what they're doing, but the chill effect is very impactful. The businesses are suffering, and I don't know that it's helping all that much, right? I will say, I've seen Sweden. People have been sending me things about Sweden. The first lockdown in a neighborhood happened in Sweden yesterday morning. They were talking about it. As far as I know, it's a suggestion. It's not law. It's not a law. And I don't even think it's as impactful as the health officials, the local health officials' rules. I could be wrong on that, but there are reports of Sweden having certain neighborhoods locked down now. So that's interesting to note, and it's interesting to see why people in Wales are up in arms over a new lockdown that happens. I think that's starting Wednesday, and today's Wednesday. So they're saying that there's 3 people in hospital and 80 cases, and they're locked down. So do I think that the lockdown in Sweden is a direct correlation to the virus being bad enough that, oh no, Sweden now needs to lock down? No, I do not. I don't know what it is, but I don't think it is directly related to the virus spiking in an uncontrollable way. Send me articles if you think I'm wrong. I'm fine with being wrong, and I will report on it. Moving on, this is a weird one. This is just strange. The Ford Nation Bill 213, the Better for People, Smarter for Businesses Act, part of the COVID-19 plan to support Ontario and small businesses, will stop married couples from taking the other's last name or hyphenating their last names. I read through this bill trying to see if it was like the forced, like if you choose to take the name, then you can, but like the forced taking it, I don't know. I don't know what the mentality behind this is. Like, destroying tradition, destroying going back in the name of the public good, destroying a long-held tradition. I'm not sure what the benefit here is. I don't get it, and what the end game is, and how they're framing this as good for people in COVID times, right? Like, oh, that last name thing, that's quite Western of you. I don't know. Is that even Western? I thought that was kind of universal. I thought it was a global thing. I thought it was a human thing, that the name goes down the male line generally. Anyway, so you want to just break that history? I don't know. The systemic racism runs very deep in Canada, Freeland says, and she's using the fires and the fishery, and I believe that somebody told me that I said the name wrong yesterday, so I apologize for that. But there is more to this, and I was looking for the name in here. There's more to this story, and I knew that there was more to the story. Apparently, the fishers, the indigenous people who are claiming the land rights and claiming that they're not allowed to fish are fishing out of season. So they're fishing during breeding season, which isn't good because that's bad for future seasons, okay? And I'm not a fisherman, I'm not a farmer or anything to that effect, but you don't fish during breeding season. I've heard lobsters, you don't do that, and other fish, you give them time to recoup their numbers, right? And blah, blah, blah. And so apparently there's a lot more to this, and the disputes are not nearly what Miss Freeland and Jagmeet Singh are making them. And people who are trying to stop this improper fishing are being vilified, etc. So there's a lot more to this. And again, I don't have the time to pick this thread up. not full-time, not yet. And probably I'm making a mistake here. Maybe I'll make the time tomorrow to read more about this. But this is the kind of stuff that they use to further fan the flames of division. And you just need to be aware of that, right? Like going really deep into this. And I said this yesterday, I think is going to be a lot like the rail blockades. They're going to highlight the people that they want to highlight. They're going to make the story into what they want it to, want people to be sharing and talking about and outraged about. And we won't get anywhere. Right? Like we won't get anywhere. So, it's frustrating. That's what I mean when I say that the leaders are focusing on the wrong things. They're not solving the real problems. They're not. They're looking at exploiting the division and making it as impactful as it could possibly be. And that's just awful. Just awful. Here's Ottawa's approving a natural gas expansion. That's interesting because they're winding one down in BC. So I thought that was interesting. Alberta gets, Jason Kenney says, pleased to see Ottawa finally approve the natural gas expansion. The $2.3 billion expansion is great news for Alberta and will create thousands of jobs. We will work with TC Energy to ensure the project's success. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of Jason Kenney. I don't know what to make of all of these things that they're doing because it seems like there's a clear plan and then stuff like that happens. So. Removing Sir John A. Macdonald isn't cancel culture. It's a sign of cultural renaissance. Is the cultural renaissance you're trying to achieve the Orwellian one, right? Like a race. We have always been at war with Eurasia, right? Like erasing the founder of the country isn't a cultural renaissance. It's not. You're wrong. You're wrong. And you're not looking critically at the situation. And there's a lot wrong with it. There's a lot wrong with Queen's University approving the removal of the statue. There's a lot wrong with the committee that came up with the proposal. There's a lot wrong with nobody standing up and stopping this at any point, right? Like everybody has been corrupted by this false critical race theory, racist garbage. It's racist. It's garbage. And people are so afraid to stand up and speak out about it because they'll get targeted by the woke mobs. But if we won't regain our ability to have a reasonable conversation unless we're able to speak freely and make mistakes. And humans make mistakes. And you can't judge the founder of the country by 2020 standards when the country is 150 years old. I'm sorry. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. And we should have some respect for the past. Look at what we built together as a country. And yeah, there have been mistakes, sure. But humans are flawed creatures and they make mistakes. And through history, you can't erase the mistakes that people make, and you can't fix it if you don't even know about it. So why are we erasing these things? Morons. Randy Hillier is posting. Yesterday I posted this. I thought it was Tam's Pay. It's not Tam's Pay. This one's Kieran Moore's. He's the medical officer of health. I guess all the medical officers of health, is that across the board? Like everyone makes that much money? Everyone got a 15% raise? Wild, right? Like that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I wonder if they're getting full pay during the pandemic. Doctor on COVID frontline speaks out on why more lockdowns aren't the answer. Lockdowns what's the plan? Lockdown forever until there's a vaccine? Can you tell me when the last time humans did that to success, right? How long did the Spanish flu take to fully go through the humanity? This is bunk. Medically assisted deaths in Canada could increase by 1,200 next year if proposed changes enacted. So they're going to kill 1,200 more people. And yet, COVID-19, with 3,000 deaths, is lockdown city. Time to be locked down, right? 45 in ICU. Like, this is the case-demic that we're experiencing is in no way anything like the first wave. It's not deadly. And they're testing 800 times more people than they were in the first wave, right? Like, why? I know why, and you know why. Money. That's what I think. That's my speculation, right? That's my opinion. But I guess opinion these days is even dangerous to have, right? Just unbelievable. Unbelievable what's happening in this country. Unbelievable what people are willing to look the other way. Unbelievable how low the information, or how little information people have or even want to have about what's going on, right? Like even if you start to talk about one of the aspects of what's going on with this government wanting to bring down this government wanting, with the current Liberal government wanting to bring down the current government in order to keep their secrets hidden. And if you say that to somebody, you get the glassy eyes, and somebody like you can tell when people check out, and it's very difficult to have a meaningful conversation, right? Because the well has been poisoned effectively, and the Liberals know how to push those buttons, right? Yes, they do. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's enough out of me today. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. I recorded a new Speaking Moistly yesterday with Greg. It was fun. We talked about demoralization, and I think that the effect of, like, you don't have a vacation coming up, do you? You don't have a sun holiday or a Disneyland holiday. You can't take your kids to Great Wolf Lodge or to your in-laws' house in another province. There's nothing to look forward to. And how long can humans survive like that without any kind of hope of even like building your own business in your own city? No plans for the future? How long can we do that? How long is it responsible for a government to say, no, lock down further, lock down further. We need you to stay locked down so that, 3,000 of you don't die, but we're going to kill 1,200 of you, and here, there's costs are mentioned. Yeah, they're going to savings of $149 million savings. Yay! Death panels. Do you remember talking about death panels? Barack Obama's death panels? I mean, right? Who gets to decide? Listen, if you, sir, decide to have a medically assisted death, you'd be helping Canada to the tune of, seriously, there are people who are going to be selling this. Why? Because it costs the government less in end-of-life care, right? Like, it's going to be really expensive. You've got other options. It's going to be real painful too. Wink, right? Money savings. Okay. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out Canada Poly, blah, 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 blah. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.